I'm Chris. I'm here to bore you for the next hour. I've got to condense 5 years of formal education, 32 years of experience into 1 hour. Go. It's not going to happen. Okay, anatomy of the spine. I thought we'd go through that first. How many lumbar vertebrae do we have? 5. There's 5 lumbar vertebrae. So if we look at our spine, we've got our lower limb. How many legs do we have? That's not a trick question. Well done. We've got 2 legs. We've got a pelvis. This is visualization at its finest. 5 lumbar vertebrae. There's 1, 2, 3. So I can count. That was my first lesson at physio school, was actually learning to count. I shit you not. We all had to stand there and count. Amazing. 5. Okay. Oh shit. Why didn't it stay up? There's nothing supporting it. So we have muscles. Okay, we have muscles to support our back. Without the muscles, would be an absolute mess. Now, you just imagine, everybody just tap your shoulder. Okay, keep tapping it. Imagine tapping your shoulder for the next 3 days. Eventually you get a bruise. You would agree? So, if a muscle's tight and you keep moving, you're going to get a little irritation. Over time, that will become a problem. So what we need to do is look at the muscles and see where it's weak, where it's strong, where it's too long. And try and correct that so we have proper alignment. Now your second lecture is absolutely brilliant. The Feldenkrais method is amazing. I would recommend everybody give it a go. It's learning how to move your body well. But my job is to do the more formal stuff. Okay? How many muscles in the lumbar spine and the legs? More than 1? More than 2? I think we can all agree there's just shitloads. Okay? Now if you want to, there you go. There's some of them there. Hamstrings. Now any joint that a muscle goes over, it has the ability to control that joint. The hamstring goes over the knee, it attaches into your butt. Now while you're sitting, if you lift your butt up, you put your hand underneath, you'll feel a bone. That's where your hamstring attaches into. You don't have to do it, but you know, I'll do it for you. I'll be you, okay? That attaches there. So it goes over the knee, it goes over the hip. So it has the ability to control both of these. And because it goes into the pelvis region, it can control what happens with your back. You with me so far? All right. How do we test for hamstring length and why is it important? Don't answer. Right. If I'm sitting here, I keep my back straight, I straighten my leg, the hamstring will pull on my pelvis, which will make me slouch, okay? You're lucky I've got an incredibly tight hamstring. So I can go up to here while keeping my back straight. If I want to go further, I have to slouch and I can go up. But I've slouched, so that's going to irritate my back. So when you're walking and you get to here, if your hamstrings are tight, that's going to rock your pelvis. It's going to rock it, okay? And over time, that becomes a problem. So we need to make sure we have good length in our hamstrings. All right, how many different ways are there to stretch a hamstring? Anybody? How do you stretch a hamstring? Can someone show me? Excellent. Okay? Any other ways? So we've got this one. Leg up. Ooh, testing me. I like that. Sorry, we've had such a great summer. I have beautiful tan legs. Yeah, calm yourself down, ladies. All right, anyway. All right, so if I bend forward, I'm stretching my hamstrings. What's happening to my back? It's being stretched. We have a wonderful thing called a hip joint, okay? We need to hip hinge, okay? See if this works this time. Okay, so let's go on to the hip hinge. Why is hip hinge important? It's because you're going to use your hip as a joint and not your back. Protects your back. You can only really hip hinge correctly when standing if you have good length in your hamstrings, okay? Now, can everybody sit up straight? You've just hip hinged. Well done. Congratulations. Okay, that gives you an idea. That separates your back. Whoa! From that, okay? So, if you want to stretch and I just make a muscle long, can I then control that muscle in that length, in that new position? A little bit unstable. So a really good way to stretch is to stretch a muscle and then have control of it. So a suggestion for hamstring stretches, if I keep my back straight, you can all do this if you want, and then I straighten my leg, when I feel a pull, I'm stretching. I'm keeping my back straight, so I'm working my postural muscles, my back muscles, I'm working my quads, and I'm lengthening. That way, in that new range of movement, you're going to have control in that range. How long should we hold a stretch for? 10 seconds. Anybody? 10? 20?
20 to 30.
30? Any advances on 30? Okay. Up to 20 seconds of a stretch. It's like stretching a spring and letting go of it. It goes back to the same position it was. If you overstretch a spring and you let go, what happens to it? It goes back to a lengthened position. We want to increase the length. So from 20 seconds on is when a stretch becomes effective. Up to 20 seconds is your warm-up stretch. You're just maintaining what you've got. Nothing wrong with that whatsoever. Brilliant. If you're tight, you want to stretch for more than 20. So I recommend people hold a stretch for 1 minute. Or 60 seconds, whichever comes first. I'm really not fussy. Okay? And what I suggest you do is you do it 3 or 4 times a day for 2 weeks, not eternity, and see what happens. You'll be amazed at the difference. So that's your hamstrings. With me so far? I'm zooming here. That's your hip hinge, okay? The one on the right looks perfect posture, really good for business. One on the left, not so good for business, so don't do it. No, joking. That's the way you should do it, hip hinging, okay? So how do you teach people to separate their hip from their back? Because when a lot of people bend forward, they just go down like that, which is using their back. To use your hip joint, you want to keep it straight, okay? What is it? So, there's a lot of books and stuff around saying you get your pole out, you hold it there, hold it on your sacrum, there, you keep it level, and then you go forward. Okay? Absolutely brilliant. A progression, what I do in my physio, is we want to be able to separate the hip from the back. A really good way is kneeling. And they just rock backwards. So when people do it wrong, they're going to arch back and they'll go back. If they're doing right, you get the tilt. And then they just learn to separate their hip from their pelvis in kneeling. Then you can go to standing. Further progression to doing that. And then you can actually be able to distinguish between your hip and your back, which is really, really important. Now, as I said, any muscle that goes over the joint has the ability to control it. We have a thing called hip extension, which is when the leg goes back. Anybody know the 2 main movers of that muscles that will be involved in hip extension? Yes? Well done. Correct. And your hamstring. Okay? The muscle that has the center of movement as the hip joint should be the muscle that works first to extend the hip. The reality is, though, the majority of us use our hamstrings to initiate the movement. Okay? What do you say? I say that too. So what that means, that was my good writing as well, is you've got your leg, your bum, your hip joint. The glutes that go over, its center of movement is your hip joint. If you're using your hamstring to move your hip, its center of movement is out here. So that means as your leg goes up, this is going to go down. So it's going to stress your back. If your hip moves, as this goes up, nothing happens. It stays stationary. Okay? So, just as a little exercise, I'd like you to take a lie on your tummy, on the floor. Come join me. Place one hand on one of your glutes, your butt. I would like you to lift your leg up And I'd like you to stop lifting your leg up when you feel your glutes tighten up. How many of you felt your glutes tighten up when your leg was off the floor? Just say yes.
Yes.
How many of you felt your glutes tighten up before your leg started to lift up?
Yes.
2 people out of this many, okay? So, if your leg is up in the air and you felt your glutes tighten up, I think it's fair to say that your hamstrings are doing the work, not your glutes. Because if it was your glutes, that would be contracting first. Have a seat. So a lot of my time, I'm teaching people to work their glutes before their hamstrings come into play. The simplest way to do that, and I'll demonstrate on myself so I don't have to pick on anybody, is, it's highly technical. Squeeze your bum. Bend your knee. Lift your thigh. Lower your thigh. Lower your leg. Relax your bum. Glutes, tighten. You're bending your knee to get your hamstrings busy, doing something. The thing that's going to lift your leg up then is mostly your glutes. And then you do the opposite. The big thing is you've got to mindfully tighten your butt. Otherwise it's going to be on holiday. Okay? There are a few issues with that. And that's if you're tight in the front. Which hopefully leads us to iliopsoas. Okay. If we're tight in the front, that pulls the pelvis forward. So when you lift, luckily I'm really tight. When I lift up, I'm going to do that because I want to take the stress off it. That's no good for your back. Why are we now so tight in our hip flexors? Anybody got any ideas?
Spend a lot of the day.
Absolutely. Yeah. We spend all our time here. So while we're sitting, what's getting tight? Hamstrings. Hip flexors. What's getting lengthened? Your glutes. Our muscles will get strong depending on the range of movement we stretch or we use it in. Okay? So our glutes are most probably really strong in this position. Bloody useful. Hamstrings, strong here. Incredibly useful and tight. So when you straighten, it's going to rock your pelvis. Hip flexors. Nice loose here. When we straighten up, our pelvis is going to go forward, loading our spine up. We've got to take that stress pressure off. So we've got to lengthen iliopsoas. So we've got iliopsoas, if you're interested, made up of 2 muscles, iliacus and psoas major. You can forget that now, but that's it there. Attaches from the front of the spine. From the pelvis, the joints there. Does that. Okay? If my feet are planted, it's going to rock my pelvis forward. Okay? It's a hip flexor. That is the same movement as tilting forward. My feet are planted. We don't walk around like that, we walk around with our feet planted. Okay? So we need to learn how to stretch that out. I'm going to do a stretch and see if anybody can tell me what I'm doing wrong. But pitch is plenty. Okay, I'm kneeling up here. I have incredibly tight hip flexors. You see everybody do this stretch? Yep. However, how can I stretch? Pelvic tilt. Then I go to there and I'm stretching. If you don't pelvic tilt, flatten your back, you're not stretching your hip flexors, you're just looking good. Okay? Pelvic tilt. Easy. Then go forward. A prime example of that, if I can pick on somebody, not look at anybody in particular. Just have a seat on the edge. So how, move forward to an uncomfortable position. Beautiful. Right, I'm going to lay that. So how I test hip flexors, or one of the ways, is I hold the pelvis there. You don't do this, this is just an example. And the leg went out. People with a tight, relax your leg. So I picked a really bad example of someone with really good flexibility, but there's a muscle that goes over the hip and knee called rectus femoris. If it's tight, the leg will be pulled forward. If it's lengthened, you should be able to push it back. If the hips flexors tight, this leg will be up in the air. So I often see people with their leg up in the air and their leg all the way forward. Okay, that means if I push that down, there's a lot of stress on that. That's just an example, okay? Thank you. I should have So, again, how long are you going to hold the stretch for if you're stretching?
1 minute.
Yeah, why not? How many times a day? Exactly. Give it a couple of weeks, see what happens. That will take a load of stress off your back. It's quite incredible and very, very simple. If you see someone doing a beautiful stretch this way, congratulate them on looking good. Okay? They're just wasting their time. Abdominals. Why are the abdominals important? They're just part of your core. Yep. You've got all the muscles at the back. You've got your side muscles. You need something at the front to keep it upright, otherwise it's going to fall over. You've got rectus abdominis, which is your washboard abs. Look fantastic. I would show you mine, but they've been hidden for a little while. You've got your obliques, which control your pelvis. Then you've got transverse abdominis, okay? It's important to keep those nice and strong. They work by posteriorly pelvic tilting. Your iliopsoas tilts your pelvis forward. So how do you know if you've got strong enough abdominals? We guess? Yep. There's a little test you can do. Can I borrow somebody, please? Anybody? Anybody at all? Thank you. I'll do you to volunteer. Get it on your back, please. So the theory is your abdominal should be about 80% strength of your hip flexors. That means you have to work your abdominals against your hip flexor. Pause. So we bend both knees. Sorry. Can you pelvic tilt flat in your back? That's arching. That's cool. So pelvic tilt to flat in your back. What do? Doing my little tests. I place my hand on your back. Arch your back. Cool. Squash the shite out of my hand. Awesome. You get into squash, so you know that's your abdominals working. Okay? Then if I get them to do a hip flexion, if the back arches, I know the hip flexor is stronger than the abdominals. There is another muscle you can get to do this. It's called your diaphragmatic muscle. What does your diaphragm also do? Absolutely. So, if they're weak in their abdominals, they use their diaphragmatic muscle. What will they stop doing? Yes, what colour will they go? Yay! So, what I do, squash down, is I talk to them. And I make sure they're breathing. I make sure they don't go red. If that happens, I know they're over 50% strength. They're on to a winner. Okay? So, keep squashed. You're going to be strong on this. Alright, keep squashed. I want you to lift this knee up to here, keeping my hand squashed. So I've used a hip flexor against the abdominals. That's stage one. Hold that there. Lift the other leg off. Don't come off my hand. That's stage two. Lower both legs down. Keep my hand squashed. No, sorry, you're not hearing me right. Keep my hand squashed. Alright, that's stage three. Thank you. That's how you test it. Okay, so you want to strengthen up the abdominals. Very few people are actually 80% strength. Or if they are, they can be strong. Because we stand in an anterior tilt, they'll be strong in that position, but they'll be weak in that position. Because a muscle will be strong depending on the range you use it in. Okay, so if you just strengthen up your biceps in this range, you'll get incredibly strong in that range, but you'll be weak in this range. So you have to work a strength, the muscle, through a full range of movement to get it strong. Have I lost you? So I said 32 years of experience in 1 hour. We're going well. Okay, we've got foundations of support. All the muscles that go down the leg and go up your back come from your pelvis. So you've got to make sure those muscles around the pelvis are strong, that's why we call it your core, before you work on the other ones. Because if you strengthen your, I love it, you go to a gym, someone's just joined it, they do squats. Brilliant. Lat pull down, bend over row, massive here, weak here. So all they've got is an incredibly strong muscle here that's pulling their pelvis all over the place. They wonder why they get a back injury. They've forgotten the foundations of strengthening up your core. How long does it take before there's a physiological change to a muscle? You exercise a muscle, how long before that muscle actually changes? Week? 3 weeks. We've got 3 weeks here. Any advances on 3 weeks? Dead silence. Yeah. 4 weeks. Any strength increase you get before the 4 weeks is all neurological. From 4 weeks on, that's where the mitochondria replicate, increased capillarization, sarcomeres all develop. So there's 4 weeks of exercise before you're going to change. So I like HIIT is incredibly popular at the moment, high intensity interval training. People need to get fit for HIIT. Get everything strong, get your tendons strong, then give it a go. Give yourself 8 weeks to get fit for something. If I went and ran a marathon tomorrow, apart from killing myself, I'd be so sore because I haven't trained. We need to train to get the changes so we can do what we want to do. Okay? So we've got our pelvis. The other foundation support is our shoulder blade for the shoulder. The other one is our feet. There is another muscle deep inside the hip that keeps our pelvis in a neutral position. If it's weak, we drop down. Now, how many people have you seen walking around if they've got a sore hip that do this? Okay. It's called the penguin walk. Okay? We want to keep our eyes level. That movement is the same as hip abduction. So we've got a muscle that does that. Abduction. Okay? If our foot's planted, it's the same as dropping down. Okay? Because we want to keep our eyes in the same level, we're going to do that. So if the muscle's weak, the hip drops, we correct it by doing that. That's why you see that. And that means to me, A, you're in pain in the hip, but the muscle's gone weak deep inside. And we need to strengthen up that muscle, posterior or gluteus medius or posterior gluteus medius. So how do you test if it's strong? Any volunteers? Okay. We've got a band going down the side called the ITB. We've got tensor fasciae lata at the front, glute max at the back. Deep under that is your posterior gluteus medius. We want that to be strong. Has everybody heard of clams? What do we do the clams for? To strengthen up this muscle, okay? So, foot in line with the knee, hip in line with the shoulder, we rotate up, okay? That's going to work a muscle, so it's going to teach us how to switch it on. Is that the same amount of strength required if I jump off 2 feet, land, and then go for a run? No. So doing clams is okay. It's not functional though. You're doing this movement quite slow. That will be the same as me walking at this pace. Oh, see, that's what we don't walk at that pace. We don't run at that pace. So we've got to think more on our feet about, we need to strengthen that. It's an endurance muscle, so we have to tire it, so it gets tired, so it adapts to the stresses we place on it, so we've got to strengthen it up. So I invented something called the band song, which is a fun thing. It goes for 5 minutes, 15 seconds, you have a band. Everybody seen these? Never worry if it breaks. Don't know why. Feet, shoulder width apart. Twist it around, stand up. Now some people say, bend your knees, lean slightly forward to work it. Do I walk around like this? No. You're going to get strong in that range. Yes, you'll work the muscle. It's not functional though. So why not be standing up? Because that's what we do. I wanted to bring bands for everybody, but I just couldn't get the time. So you place stress. You take a step that way. You bring this in the same distance. You go 8 times one way, 8 times the other. Okay? Then back at 45 degrees. Okay? You do it for 5 minutes, 15 seconds, you'll feel the burn in here. Yeah. Yeah, that long.
Is that the same as when you put the little thing around?
Something I prepared earlier. Absolutely. Easier, just different. Some people can't hold on.
But all the same.
Yep. It's just designed to get that strong. So forgotten muscle really needs to be strong. At our gym we have the band cup competition. The record is 54 minutes of continuously doing that exercise. They were going to kill each other, so I had to stop them. But it was fun to watch. But they can keep their pelvis neutral, which is absolutely brilliant, which is what you want to do. Right.